Welcome to the Deep Fear channel. Watch closely, stay alert, and don't forget to subscribe. Story 1. The Frozen Howl. The helicopter lifted off and vanished into the white Alaskan sky, leaving 12 men alone in their remote oil camp. The nearest town was 100 miles south, and winter had already swallowed the sun. For the next 2 months, they were cut off from the world. Ethan Carver, the rookie of the crew, felt the silence settle heavy. No birds, no engines, just wind screaming across endless snow. "Feels like the world ended," he muttered. "Out here, kid," Mason, the foreman, said around a cigarette. "Sometimes it feels like it did." That night, a blizzard rolled in. The men huddled in the mess hall while the storm battered the thin walls. As they ate, a sound rose above the gale, a long, mournful howl. "Wolves?" Ethan asked. Benny the cook shook his head. "No wolves this far north." The men laughed it off, but unease crept into the room. Later, in the bunkhouse, Ethan and Jacob heard it again. This time, it was closer. Too close. Wiping frost from the window, Ethan glimpsed a figure moving on all fours before straightening to its full skeletal height. Two pale eyes stared back through the storm. By the time they dragged Mason to look, it was gone. The next morning, Carter was missing. His parka was gone, and his bed was cold. Mason organized a search. They found boot prints leading into the storm, staggering as if Carter had been chased. Beside them, massive paw prints, far too big for wolves. The wind rose in a shrieking howl. Ethan swore he saw a shape gliding between the snowdrifts. They ran back to camp, slamming the door shut behind them. Carter never returned. That night, the generator failed. The camp plunged into blackness. Then came 3 deliberate knocks at the door. Knock, knock, knock. "Let me in," a voice begged. Carter's voice. The men froze. Relief flickered across their faces, but Ethan felt ice in his veins. The words were flat, wrong, like an echo. "Let me in, hungry." Mason raised his rifle. "That ain't Carter." The voice stopped. The howling resumed. 2 nights later, Danny broke. When the voice came again, this time calling his daughter's name, he lost his mind. Before anyone could stop him, he flung open the door and ran into the storm. A blur of motion snatched him away. His scream was cut short. Ethan slammed the door, hands trembling. Danny was gone. Mason refused to wait for the creature to strike again. "We set a trap," he said. They dragged a frozen slab of meat into the snow and waited with rifles ready. Hours passed before a figure stumbled into view. Carter. His parka hung in shreds. His lips were blue, his skin frostbitten, but his eyes gleamed unnaturally bright. Dropping to his knees, he tore into the meat with bare hands, ripping frozen flesh with animal hunger. "Jesus, he's alive," someone whispered. Ethan's stomach churned. "No, he's not." Carter's blood-smeared face snapped up. He grinned, wide and grotesque, then let out a howl that rattled the windows. Bullets ripped through him, but Carter didn't fall. He rushed the camp, slamming into the walls with inhuman strength. "Brace the door!" Mason roared. The bunkhouse shook as claws raked metal, shrieks rising above the storm. The men fired wildly, praying lead could kill what Carter had become. For a moment, silence. Then, scratching at the roof. Ethan looked up, heart hammering. "It's not outside anymore." The ceiling buckled. Snow and claws burst through. Screams filled the bunkhouse as the thing that had once been Carter dropped among them. Eyes burning, teeth bared. The storm swallowed their cries, carrying them across the frozen wilderness. By morning, the camp was silent. Only the wind remained, howling over the snow. Story 2. The Black Ice Road. The Dalton Highway was a stretch of hell frozen over. 600 miles of ice, snow, and night, carved through the Alaskan wilderness. Truckers called it the Black Ice Road, because once you lost control, there was no coming back. Earl Donovan had driven it for 20 years. But this trip was different. The storm was worse than usual, the load heavier, and he was alone. His radio crackled with static. His headlights carved narrow tunnels of light through the whiteout. Beyond that, nothing but endless dark. He told himself to focus, 1 mile at a time. The first time he saw her, she stood at the roadside, a pale woman in a thin dress, hair black and whipping in the wind. She didn't move as Earl's truck thundered past. Her face was hidden, head tilted down. Earl gripped the wheel tighter. Christ almighty, must be seeing things. Nobody could survive out here dressed like that. His eyes had to be playing tricks. But 10 miles later, he saw her again. Same spot by the road, same dress, same bowed head. The storm worsened. Earl flicked on the radio for company, but only static answered. Every so often, his headlights caught movement, trees bending, snow swirling. But always there she was, waiting by the road. Then she was closer, standing in the center of the lane. Earl swerved, tires screaming on ice. The truck nearly jackknifed, the trailer fishtailing, before he fought it back under control. He glanced in the mirrors, expecting to see her body crumpled on the ice. But the road behind was empty. By midnight, exhaustion clawed at him. He pulled over at a turnout, leaving the engine idling to keep from freezing. Snow hammered the windshield. His breath fogged the cab. A knock jolted him upright. Tap, tap, tap on the passenger side window. Earl turned slowly. The woman stood inches away, her face finally visible. Skin white as bone, lips blue, eyes black voids. Frost rimed her lashes. Earl scrambled for the gear shift, slamming the truck into drive. The woman's lips moved soundlessly, breath fogging the glass. Then she vanished. The next hours blurred into terror. No matter how far he drove, she was there, by the road, in the lane, reflected in the mirrors. Sometimes whispering in his ear, though no one was in the cab. Sometimes in the back seat, shadows shifting behind him. "You shouldn't be here," her voice finally hissed, cold and hollow. Earl gritted his teeth. "Neither should you." He reached an old truck stop just before dawn. Abandoned, windows broken, sign half buried in snow. He killed the engine and stepped out, desperate for solid ground. The cold bit his skin instantly. The woman stood by the pumps, hair blowing in the wind. Earl raised his flashlight, rage overcoming fear. "What the hell are you?" Her head tilted, bones cracking. She stepped closer, her bare feet leaving no prints in the snow. And behind her, others emerged, dozens of pale figures, all in ragged clothes, eyes black, jaws slack, men, women, children, their faces frozen in agony. Earl stumbled back. Ghosts. The woman spoke, her voice carrying over the storm. "We are the road. Those who died here. We never leave." The figures closed in, surrounding the truck. The sound of the wind shifted. It wasn't howling anymore. It was screaming. Earl dove into his cab, slamming the doors. His hands shook as he jammed the truck into gear. He roared onto the highway, engine straining, tires slipping on the black ice. The pale faces chased him in the mirrors, fading into the storm, but never gone. For the next 100 miles, Earl drove like a madman. But he knew, you don't beat the black ice road. By the time he reached Fairbanks, the woman was already sitting in the passenger seat, silent and smiling. Earl's hair turned white that winter. He never drove again. But sometimes, truckers say they still see his rig on the Dalton, headlights cutting through the storm, a pale woman riding beside him. Story 3. The Abandoned Whaling Station. The boat rocked on the gray Alaskan sea as fog curled low over the waves. 4 friends, Mark, Lena, Chris, and Dana, leaned over the rail, staring at the silhouette rising from the mist. The whaling station loomed like a corpse. Rusted cranes jutted into the air, their cables dangling like nooses. Broken smokestacks leaned over collapsed roofs. The stench of salt and oil lingered even after decades. Chris grinned. Told you it was real. Shut down in the 50s, they say. Nobody's been here since. Lena adjusted her scarf, shivering. And we're here because, Chris said, eyes glinting, abandoned places make the best stories. The boat thudded against the rotting dock. Inside, the station was a maze of rust and shadow. Whalebones littered the floors. Massive ribs and vertebrae piled in corners like firewood. Old machinery stood silent, slick with oil. The air was heavy with the smell of rot that never left. Dana gagged. God, it's like the whales are still here. Mark lifted his camera, snapping pictures. Exactly. This is gold. They wandered deeper. Signs of sudden abandonment were everywhere. Coffee mugs fossilized in dust, ledgers half-filled, boots left by lockers. It was as if the workers had fled in the middle of a shift. Then they found the vats. Huge metal tanks, black and crusted, where whale carcasses had been rendered down to oil. One was half full, its surface rippling though no wind touched it. Lena whispered, "That's moving." Chris leaned closer. Probably water. But when his flashlight hit the surface, pale shapes swam beneath it. Human faces, twisted and screaming, rising then sinking back into the black. They all stumbled back. "Out!" Dana hissed. "We're leaving. Now." But the fog had thickened outside. The dock had vanished into white. The boat bobbed, ropes straining, but the sea itself groaned like something alive. "We waited out," Mark said, forcing calm. "Just stay together." That night, they camped in the station's office. Wind rattled the windows. Somewhere below, metal groaned, chains clanked. Dana sat wide-eyed. That's not the wind. Then came the sound of wails. Low, mournful calls vibrating through the walls. But they weren't in the sea. They were inside the building, echoing through the pipes. Chris pressed his ear to the floor. "They're under us!" The floorboards bulged, wet stains spreading. A crack split the wood, and something pushed through. Whaleskin, slick and gray, stretching, breathing. The friends screamed and bolted. The halls warped around them. Machinery dripped blood. Bones hung from hooks like meat. Shadows moved between the vats. Figures in oil-slicked coats, their faces hollow, eyes black pits. Whalers still working long after death. One lifted a harpoon, dragging it across the floor. The metal screeched like a scream. "Run!" Mark shouted. They tore through the station, chased by footsteps and the wail of whale song. The fog outside pulsed, glowing faintly, as if something enormous moved beneath the sea. Dana stumbled. A figure loomed behind her, swinging a hook. It pierced her chest with a wet crunch. She gasped once, then was dragged into the shadows. The others screamed her name, but she was gone. The survivors fled to the processing hall. The vats bubbled now, frothing black oil spilling across the floor. From the surface rose the forms of whales, bloated, skeletal, their eyes rolling in agony. And within their flesh, the faces of men. Lena sobbed. They killed them. All of them. And now, they're not resting, Mark finished, voice shaking. The shadows of the whalers advanced, harpoons raised. Chris hurled a lantern, flames igniting the oil. The hall erupted in fire, smoke choking the air. Screams filled the station, human and whale alike, as the walls trembled. The sea roared outside, waves smashing the dock to splinters. "Boat!" Mark shouted. "Now!" They ran through fire and fog, reaching the dock just as the sea surged. Something vast moved beneath the water, larger than any whale, larger than the station itself. A mass of bone and flesh, stitched from the dead, rising from the deep. The friends leapt for the boat, scrambling aboard as the fog peeled back. For one terrible moment, Lena looked down into the water. Countless eyes stared back, human and whale, all screaming in silence. She screamed and turned away. Mark gunned the engine, tearing into the fog. Behind them, the station collapsed into the sea, swallowed whole. The fog closed like a curtain. Days later, their boat washed ashore near Nome. Only 2 bodies were found, Lena's, frozen in terror, and Mark's clutching his ruined camera. The photos were destroyed, but fishermen still swear they hear whales crying near the old whaling grounds. And sometimes, in the fog, shadows of ships that should not sail drift silently past. Story 4. The Midnight Sun Curse. Summer in Alaska brought a strange kind of madness. For nearly 2 months, the sun never truly set. The sky glowed at midnight, and the nights felt wrong, bright, endless, sleepless. When Emily and her brother Jack flew to Barrow, now called Utqiagvik, for research, they expected cold winds, quiet tundra, and maybe some folklore to spice up their anthropology project. What they didn't expect was the story whispered by their host, an old Inupiaq woman named Sela. "Don't walk when the sun touches midnight," she warned, her eyes clouded. "That's when the night eaters come." Emily laughed it off, jotting it into her notebook. Folklore, myth. But Jack felt a chill he couldn't shake. Their cabin overlooked the sea, the horizon glowing gold at 1 a.m. Emily set up her recorder while Jack wandered outside. The silence was immense. No cars, no animals, just the crash of distant waves. Then came the footsteps. Jack spun. The tundra was empty, but the sound was clear. Slow, deliberate crunches in the gravel, circling him. "Em?" he called nervously. No answer. The air grew colder, though the sun still hung above. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw shadows stretching long across the ground, longer than they should be. When he turned, no one was there. He bolted back inside. Emily scoffed. "You're letting the old lady get in your head." But she locked the door anyway. Over the next week, they recorded stories of the night eaters, ancient beings who hated the endless sun. They prowled during the midnight glow, hunting those foolish enough to wander. "They don't eat flesh," one man said. "They eat time. Take years from you. Take your future." Jack noticed he was already changing. His reflection looked tired. skin pale, eyes shadowed. He felt older, weaker, as if something drained him each night. Emily brushed it off. Jet lag, stress. But then she found Jack's footprints in the gravel outside their cabin. Fresh, perfect circles around the house. Jack swore he hadn't gone out. That night, she set up a camera facing the window. At midnight, the recording showed shadows moving across the tundra. Tall, gaunt figures, their limbs too long, faces blurred, circling the cabin. At one point, one pressed its hand against the glass, long fingers leaving frost. Emily stopped the tape, heart racing. We're leaving. Tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Jack vanished first. Emily woke to his scream, ran to his room, and found the window wide open. His bed was empty, sheets stiff with frost. She searched the tundra for hours, the sun burning above, never moving. Finally, she saw him in the distance, walking slowly across the ice toward the sea, his skin pale, his hair white. "Jack!" she screamed, running after him. He turned once. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt, as if decades had drained from him overnight. Then he walked into the waves, the sea swallowing him whole. Emily collapsed, sobbing. She returned to the cabin, desperate to escape. But the shadows were waiting inside. They slid across the walls, across her skin, whispering in voices that sounded like Jack, like her mother, like herself. "You stayed too long," they hissed. "Now you are ours." The last thing she saw was her reflection in the window, her hair already streaked with gray. 8 weeks later, locals found the cabin empty. The camera still ran, footage filling the tapes. The last video showed Emily sitting on the floor, staring blankly ahead, her skin wrinkled, her eyes hollow. She whispered over and over, "The sun never sets. The sun never sets. The sun never sets." Story 5. The Hollow Mountain. The pilot dropped them off with a wave and a warning. "Don't wander into the mountain after dark," he said. "The echoes aren't just echoes." Tom, Claire, and Mike laughed it off. They were experienced hikers, thrill seekers chasing adventure in Alaska's Brooks Range. Their target was a cave system locals called the Hollow Mountain, mile after mile of tunnels carved into black rock. The locals avoided it, which only made the friends more determined to go. The mouth of the cave yawned wide, dripping with icicles. The air was colder inside, carrying a faint metallic tang. Their headlamps cut beams of white through the dark. "This is insane," Claire whispered, her breath fogging. Mike grinned. "Insane is good." They pressed deeper. The walls glistened as if wet, though no water dripped. The tunnels twisted, splitting into passages that wound back on themselves. Strange markings scratched into the rock. Spirals, claw-like grooves. Tom frowned. "Animals, maybe?" But the grooves were too deliberate. Hours passed. Their maps proved useless. The tunnels shifted in impossible ways, loops folding into loops. They marked the walls with chalk, only to find the marks gone minutes later. "Did we pass this spot already?" Claire asked. Mike swore. "No way. We've been going straight." But Tom felt it too. The cave was alive, shifting around them. Then the echoes began. At first, just their footsteps bouncing back. But soon, the echoes didn't match. When Tom stopped, the echo kept walking. When Claire spoke, the echo answered in a voice not her own. "Mike," it whispered, though she hadn't said a word. They froze. "Okay," Tom said tightly, "we're turning back." But there was no back. The tunnels had changed. Their trail markers were gone. The air pressed heavier, colder. The whispers grew louder. Sometimes it was their own voices mocking. Sometimes it was strangers. Then came the light. A faint glow deeper in the cave, pulsing like a heartbeat. Against his better judgment, Mike moved toward it. The others followed, afraid to be left alone. They entered a chamber unlike anything they'd seen. The walls shimmered with veins of quartz, glowing faintly, and in the center, bones. Dozens of human skeletons arranged in a circle, their skulls tilted upward. "What the hell is this?" Claire whispered. The bones shifted. One skull turned. Its jaw creaked open. The chamber filled with voices. Not echoes, but screams, dozens layered together. The skeletons began to rise. They ran. The tunnels twisted violently, walls shuddering as if the mountain itself was breathing. Bones scraped along the floor behind them, rattling, clattering, chasing. Claire stumbled, her scream cut off as skeletal hands dragged her into the dark. Tom and Mike pulled each other forward, lungs burning, hearts pounding. At last they saw daylight, the cave mouth. Salvation. Mike shoved Tom ahead. "Go!" But as Tom staggered out into the snow, he heard Mike's scream echo behind him. He turned once, saw the shadows drag his friend back into the dark, and then the cave mouth slammed shut, rock sealing like a wound. The pilot returned 3 days later to find Tom alone, frostbitten, rambling about the hollow mountain. When rescuers searched the site, the cave mouth was gone. Solid rock, no entrance at all. But at night, when the wind howls through the Brooks Range, some say you can still hear the echoes. Voices trapped inside calling for help.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe.